guys, this is Morgan from Smittybilt. Today we're going to be doing a bumper install on the JK 76858, the XRC Gen 2. Everything you see here is pretty much everything that we're going to be using out of the kit for all of the installation today. Let's get into it. And before we get started, we're going to go ahead and show a picture of all the hardware laid out with everything labeled, sizes, so on and so forth, so you know everything that you're doing, everything that you're using before you go ahead and get started on the bumper. First thing we're going to do today is we're going to go ahead and mount the lights into the bumpers. Now we need to do that first because you're never going to be able to get to it once the bumper's already on. So what that's going to entail is the two mounting brackets, the hardware for the mounting brackets into the bumper, and the two light heads themselves. Now in the brackets you'll notice that there's plastic clips that are going to help retain the retaining pins and keep those lights solid and secure in the brackets. So what I usually do, little trick, is go ahead and take your flat washers, get your bolts set in the bracket like so, and then take your light and stick it into the bracket temporarily so you can set the depth of the mounting position of the bracket into the bumper, because you don't want your light sticking out too far. You kick them, you climb up on the bumper or something like that, and you could scratch or break the light lens. So set it up like this, and then take it over and get it set into the bumper like so. Okay, and then a little trick that I usually do to set the depth on it, you're going to go ahead and push it back a little bit so it's not protruding, and then take a sharp object like a scratch awl or something like that, and you're going to scribe a line across the bottom of the bracket, because in order to get the bolts tightened down, you're going to need to pop the light back out now and go ahead and set that in place. And we're going to use that line as a reference point to figure out where we need to set the bracket. So we got that mounted. Boom, and we're done. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started on the passenger side frame rail nut plate assembly. This has got to go in one way with this hole towards the front of the vehicle. This is a reinforcement hole that's going to be used later on when you add the 76857 Gen 2 tire carrier. What we've got going on here is we've got a variance on the frame, slight misalignment of the way the frame was constructed, so it's a little bit tight to get this nut plate in. Some people will have no problem sliding it in, some people will have to fight it. This particular frame is a little bit tapered, so the top end is pinched and the nut plate doesn't want to go all the way in. Unfortunately, you're just going to have to work with it, and it may take quite a lot of work to pound it in with a big hammer. Just a quick note, when you go to do the front inner bolt here on the passenger side nut plate, you may end up having to remove this bolt for the body mount on the frame. We're going to go ahead and install the two inboard bolts mounting the nut plate into the frame rail. For the front one, we're going to be using a 35mm long 12mm bolt with a split lock washer and a 40mm diameter flat washer. It's the only one in the kit. So that's going to go up in the front mounting hole, holding the nut plate into the frame rail. Now you can see here that we had an issue with the rear body mount bolt, which we had to remove to go ahead and get this bolt in. For the rearward bolt hole, we're going to be using this nut plate, and as you can see, I've already bent it a little bit. I need to finagle it a little bit more to get this to go up inside this crevice here. So we can take this other bolt, another 35 millimeter long bolt, and it's going to go in through the inside of the nut plate, and it's going to thread into this nut plate. Now once you're done, this can be trimmed off, this can be shaken off. You can twist it back and forth until it bends and snaps off. Whatever you got. All right, so the next thing we're gonna need to do is we're gonna need to drill these holes out in the frame. Now, it looks like there's only 2 that we have to drill out. So it's gonna be the second one in from the driver's side and the last one on the passenger side. They're a little bit smaller than the other 2. And that's going to allow for vertical adjustment once the bumper is actually mounted on. Now, I just used a 1/2 inch drill bit and wobbled it a little bit just to get it a little bit oversized. Not going to hurt anything with the frame, but it's going to actually help you in the long run. Quick note, this is going to be the wiring harness kit that comes with the lights. You've got your exterior harness system and your interior harness system. This also has a switch on it that you can use if you want. As far as the wiring goes, you can see here, black, blue, and red. Red's gonna be our main power. Blue's gonna be the on trigger to the lights themselves, or the power sent to the lights, and black is gonna be our ground. All right, and the last thing to do before we're ready to hang the bumper onto the vehicle is gonna be installing the driver's side nut plate. That just gets slid up into the frame, and you kind of generically line up the holes with the holes in the frame. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get the bumper hung up on the frame. Now, it's a good idea to have a floor jack, and possibly a block of wood laying around. It's a good helper to support the center of the bumper while you're trying to get the bolts in. Just a little trick. Go ahead and put the jack in. So we're going to go ahead and mount the passenger side bolts into the nut plate through the outside of the bumper. Well, for this side, we're going to go ahead and use the 45 millimeter bolts, 2 of them, 2 flat washers, 2 lock washers. And we're just going to get these started and leave them loose. So on the driver's side, we're going to be doing the same thing. The only difference is this time we're using 35 millimeter long bolts instead of the 45 millimeter. Same thing with the flat washers and the split lock washers. Let's go ahead and get it put in. Remember to keep these loose. Now we can go ahead and get the jack out of the way. So we'll go ahead and get it out of the way. And then we're going to be doing the last 4 center bolts. These are 110 millimeter long with the double nut plates. They're going to go through those 4 center holes, 2 of which we remember we drilled out. All right, so we're going to go ahead and slide the nut plate up into the bumper and put the long bolt through the cross member and through the bumper and into the nut plate. And so the main reason we left the bolts loose is for final adjustment. You want to make sure you get all the bolts started, everything in, all the proper positionings. And then basically what I typically do is I'll tighten down on the bolts until you've got some tension compressing the split lock washers. And then at that point, do any of your final adjustments. If you need to pick up one side, move it in or out, do whatever you need to do. Once you get it to your liking, then you go ahead and start snugging down the bolts. I typically start with the outsides first, and then go ahead and do the 4 center bolts. And that's it. We're done.